through repetition, if you constantly asked about gratitude and also constantly asked about service, something goes in.
Welcome to our podcast, How to Live an Extraordinary Life from Duke's Education. My name is Ricky Tavares, and alongside my superstar colleague, Libby Nicholas, we have the unique privilege of meeting world-leading figures to understand how they have successfully navigated both life's ups and downs to go on and achieve extraordinary things.
I am so proud of the staff that wake up every morning and give their heart, soul into making these children better.
This week, we're leaving the studio for Radnor House, a Duke's Education school, to meet someone who epitomises extraordinary.
I know we're on a journey. I know we're doing it in the right way, but I know what success will be in the end.
Atif Hassan is the founder and chairman of Duke's Education, and he's overcome his fair share of hardships.
This morning I was teaching a lesson and you could clearly see the children who were struggling with their ADHD, who just couldn't sit still. It was fine, and they'll be fine.
He's also the founder and chairman of Cavendish Education, a family of specialist SEND and autism schools, and he was awarded the Freedom of the City of London for his services to education in 2020. Now, here we are in this wonderful setting, Radnor House's library. I know this place has a special meaning to you. Do you want to tell us why?
Well, it's ironic we're sitting in a library because this is definitely where you wouldn't have found me at school. As someone who's dyslexic, I ran from this sort of place. But actually, at the time when I was at school, this was my sixth form common room. And it's great to be back. Lots of memories, largely good, but also a place where I got up to a lot of trouble.
I bet. I just saw your name engraved on the wall in the corner, actually.
Atif, we'd love to start by getting a sense of your origin story, your family, your background. You were born in London after your father came to the UK in 1966. Could you tell us some things about your early life?
Yeah, classic immigrant story. Dad came here with £5 in his back pocket and really nowhere to stay. Someone put him up for the night, and really from that day onwards, he was fending for himself, was fortunate enough to get a role at what is now called EY, Ernst & Young, and trained to become a chartered accountant. But the real kind of meaningful thing that happened was, sadly, my mum fell very severely ill, and we had to take her into hospital, and she had to have a valve replacement surgery, which in today's world is actually a minor op, or relatively minor op. But unfortunately, it went wrong and the valve didn't work, sending effectively the blood flow the wrong way, causing an immediate heart failure. And she sadly passed away. So the early childhood was really dominated by that, by anything else, really.
And how old were you when she died?
I was 6. My younger sister was 1.5. So it really was the three of us at the time. And very lonely existence, because obviously my dad had played a big role in supporting mum at hospital. So we were in and out of babysitters. And in the weeks and months that followed that, very challenging. My dad had to give up work. We had to move homes a number of times. And really challenging start to life, really.
What did that mean for your early education then? So, we've spoken before, and I think you sort of said you went to one of the worst schools in London.
Well, generally, the trauma of what happened when I was 6 means actually till the age of 9, 10, I actually have no memory. And as much therapy and real looking at pictures and trying to find things to relate and talking to people, I actually struggled to actually remember. So obviously I was fit and well and at school, but I really can't resonate and give you much interaction over what happened then. And lets me identify with children who have extreme trauma or big events. And in the role we do, safeguarding is a big thing, but really we don't really understand sometimes the backstories of what happens. For me, I went to a state primary and a state secondary to start with. And as you say, the worst school in London, and quite an achievement to have that. And it was rough. It was tough. It was really a survival every single day, bullying, aggressive fighting, and very little learning. And somewhat ironic given what we're doing now for a living. But I really saw where education doesn't work.
It's a very interesting phenomenon the fact that I think there's quite a lot of evidence now that children who've been through trauma, especially the loss of a parent in early childhood, go on to be very successful at a higher rate than other people. And, it must be obviously horrific trauma. And as you say, a huge impact. What did that give you in terms of skills and abilities as you move forward in your life, which enabled you to achieve what you've achieved and make you so exceptional?
Well, you wouldn't design it this way, but clearly a huge amount of resilience to cope with perhaps the toughest thing you can. It meant an extraordinary amount of independence. I was washing, ironing clothes, picking my own clothes in terms of buying them at an age which you wouldn't dream of today for our children. And it meant you became incredibly self-sufficient. That's so much so when I joined the army, which would ordinarily become quite a tough ask. That was a breeze. It meant you kind of had to teach yourself things. And what we now have worked out in education, it isn't, and particularly with AI now, it isn't about knowledge. Absolutely. Now, there is a level of knowledge we need, but it is teaching children how to learn. And that constant quest for learning. And I think that's what I learned.
And you moved from your state school into a small independent school. What impact did that have on your life?
Phenomenal. Absolutely incredible. So thrown out of school at the age of 12, 13, and sheepishly, when the head calls the father and you sit in the back of the car, even though you could sit in the front, nothing said on the drive home. Just one of those pin drop silent moments. You know what dad's thinking, and you know what is going to happen when you get home. And but I was very lucky. His approach to it was, right, we're going to send you to an independent school. He was going to richly bet the farm and everything he had on using the little bit of savings and all the earnings he had to send me to independent education initially. And then a few years later, when he could afford it, my sister. And it was a complete turning point. Suddenly teachers who wanted to teach, who were actually interested in you, and small class sizes, nurturing, really supporting my weaknesses and playing into my strengths. And the breadth of curriculum, when you almost don't know it, you thought you're having fun, from school trips to activities to plays to sporting engagements, meant that actually I was able to excel when the ordinary sort of classroom just didn't work for me.
And you've been quite open about the fact that you have dyslexia and ADHD. And some people describe those differences as being like a superpower. Is that how you see them too?
I definitely attribute the dyslexia to something which has turbocharged me, for sure. Again, a bit like trauma, I wouldn't write someone to be dyslexic just for giving them the superpower and saying, look, it's a great skill to develop. It was tough. It was deeply, deeply frustrating sitting at school, looking left, looking right, and going, why does that person learn and I can't? And I would work hard and I still didn't get it. I just couldn't sit down and finish a paragraph even. And so you just went through school thinking you're really stupid. And that sort of, as adults, we get imposter syndrome when we still do things. But imagine going through your entire schooling like that. And you just wait for lessons to finish. You just keep looking at the clock in the time. But now, when I look back, it just has enabled me to kind of think differently, collate information in a different way, simplify things. And I really think it is a superpower.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I ask how it was diagnosed? Because there's this, a lot of stats around dyslexia in particular. It's often missed. How were you diagnosed? Because it's so easily masked in many, many people. Were you one of those, or?
Yeah. So we didn't know in my schooling. I was decent at scientific, mathematical subjects and really struggled in English-based subjects, humanities and things like that. And when you choose A-levels, you're able to get rid of certain subjects. So A-levels were fine, albeit I still struggle to learn in the same way. But when I applied for my TA commission in the army, essentially you do a whole lot of psychometric testing. And my standard deviation, I was in the top quartile and top decile for certain logic-based tests. But the English essay that you write about sort of war history, I was in the bottom decile. And at that point, they assessed me and said, see, there's something wrong here. The scores are so what you call now spiky. And this is something that led us to do that.
And I guess thinking now, as a parent, what advice would you give parents who have children perhaps with dyslexia? You've also got ADHD. How would you guide them through what you've been through firsthand?
I think what we've learned that every child is so different. And the label of dyslexia or ADHD or any of them really is just something which should be there to enable you to learn it rather than a disability or any form of kind of shame. And every child is got a unique learning profile. And if you're fortunate enough to identify that and support them, wonderful. But equally, we shouldn't mollycoddle the children. It's, in a way, I was sort of fortunate that no one knew. And therefore, I was given a level playing field. Now, if I'd given a bit more of a boost, and we know the value of early intervention, it would have no doubt accelerated me. But I would also not get scared. And I see children every single day with different forms of learning. This morning, I was teaching a lesson, and you could clearly see the children who were struggling with their ADHD, who just couldn't sit still. It was fine. And they'll be fine. And it's just recognition now that there is so much support out there. So I think the real test here now is how we can embrace the neurodiverse. Everyone is different, but equally everyone can learn in this wonderful supportive environment that we are in.
You're an absolutely brilliant role model for all of those children in our schools who know that they might be slightly different, and what you've achieved with that is astonishing. We've spoken a bit about your early life. You've mentioned that after leaving school, you joined the army, and you then worked in the city as an investment banker. So from the outside looking in, I know that you had an incredibly successful career in the city. Why did you chuck it all up in the air and launch Duke's Education? What was that moment?
Well, it was a long story in how it came about, but in that journey, I had developed a reasonably successful city career. I'd worked with some extraordinary companies and worked in investments and private equity and corporate finance and investment banking. And it's wonderful. And generally, the people that work there, it drives huge amount of capital and success and learning. But it just wasn't for me. And I could feel on a daily basis that I had a quest to start something myself. That was one factor. The second was I'd grown up with a father who really believed in the notion of service, not only in serving his children, but serving society. And that as a backdrop every day, and the question he would ask me on a weekly basis, and almost still does, is what am I grateful for? And have I prayed to be thankful for that? And how much money I've given away this week? Very precise. And once you, through repetition, if you're constantly asked about gratitude and also constantly asked about service, something goes in. And so I kind of had a real deep desire to do something which is generally purposeful. I didn't know what. And probably the most tragic and meaningful thing was a few years earlier, my eldest son had passed away, and he had a genetic kidney disease. And going through that, and I wouldn't want to wish this on anyone, if you understand the value of a child's life and understand the sheer potential, and I'm blessed with now 2 wonderful children, 2 stepchildren, and then the most extraordinary 4 children. And when you look at a lens as a parent through them and what they have achieved and what they could achieve, it's just so exciting. And I had a small insight. I'd joined the board of governors of a school. I'd done some charity work, and I just realized I just love working with children. And this morning, I have to say, I was teaching, as I said, I loved it. I absolutely love it. And could I design something and design my life around something I loved and create some value? And that's what I decided to do. Barking mad at the time, obviously.
I mean, just extraordinary in terms of the bravery and determination to take such a big risk. How did you manage that risk emotionally in terms of leaving your successful career and then rewriting your life in such a new way? Something most people would never do.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's slightly morbid, but what I didn't want to happen was on my deathbed have any regrets. And there's intimacy in sort of death. We know alongside death and taxes, I guess, the certainties in life. I wanted to know that I'd given it a go. And we knew the failure rate is very high. 60% of businesses, when the first 3 years will go pop. I was not an educator, so you had a genuine imposter syndrome. I don't know really what I'm doing here. And so the odds were stacked really high. But I was happy to fail. And I'd failed so much, whether through dyslexia, whether through trauma, whether through family bereavements, that actually, relatively, what's the worst that could have happened?
Yeah. It's a type of fearlessness.
Absolutely. Walk us through then day one of Dukes. So you've remortgaged your house. You've literally put your life on a roulette wheel, sort of financially and personally. And you've got the keys to your first school. What's the mission that you're setting yourself for this organization?
So I just felt we could do better. I had seen my son, who's literally sat his last A-level today, prepare himself for the 7+. So now we're talking 11 years ago. And I just thought it was a crazy system we had in the UK where children were being assessed at 5, 7, possibly 8, possibly 10, 11, 13, 16, and 18. Now, I'm not calling for the abolition of GCSEs, but I did think at the time there must be a better way of doing this. And I wanted to see if we could shape the system that hadn't been touched since Victorian times. And I really believed that we could do it at the time. I really believe we're doing it, and I really believe in the future of the organization doing it. So that was kind of the sort of theory. It was taking a long time, and it was brewing my head for a while. The culmination of it was, alongside the two other tragedies I've talked about, I was in a triple fatality car accident where in the morning I had leased myself a new Range Rover. And I'm driving along the A40 in northwest London later that afternoon, and someone has an epileptic fit, comes into the side of my Range Rover, pushes me to the other side of the dual carriageway. Two other cars hit me face on, and the car spins around many times. And miraculously, air ambulance to hospital, I survive. Few bumps and bruises, a few cracked ribs, but nothing of any kind of thing. Everyone else passed away. And all I remember seeing is the body bags, and then in hospitals, obviously someone else sadly passed away. And that moment in time, when I was discharged, metaphorically, in my head, I was doing it. Dukes was going to be born. This was going to be my purpose. And that kind of push that I needed, it was already being brewed. And don't get me wrong, the idea was kind of there, and I'd started a few things. But at that point, I was going to give it 100%.
Just following on from that, it feels like your purpose has sort of been circumstantial in a big way.
Yeah.
For a lot of people out there, adults included, but let's focus on the younger generation for a moment, okay, who are trying to find their way in life. What advice have you got for them to start them on the track of trying to find their purpose?
I think I had a quest to run a business from a very young age. I mean, I was selling sweets in the playground at 12. I tried to do a .com when I was sort of 18, 19. I was doing a whole bunch of entrepreneurial things along the way, wheeling and dealing, doing up properties, selling them. And I couldn't quite find that thing. And I was probably pushing it. And, and that notion that we always live in the future in our heads, if I had this, I would be better. Or when that happens, life would get better. And actually, the real realization is the ability to live in the present moment. Can you enjoy now? Because actually, whilst you may say it's circumstances, but actually you had to lean into them. You couldn't be the victim. You couldn't be when I get better, or when I raise enough money, or when life allows me to do this. It was really coming still, understanding not what my parents' expectations were. They thought I was crazy. My father thought I was actually bonkers. The friends thought I was equally nuts. But this is something I wanted to do. And I was happy knowing that this is what really true to me, what Atif was going to be. And I really thought hard about what the legacy had to be.
And just on the purpose point, bringing it back to the kids, it feels like that word stillness and presence I'm a huge believer in that as well. What do you practice daily that gives you that ability? Because I know myself as an individual, I've had to work hugely hard to ground myself, make myself present. What tools are you using that enable you to just stay on point in the present moment and as a result, just perform really, really optimally?
Well, one of the practices at school we learnt was at the start and the end of the day, and the start and end of every lesson, just a moment of stillness. And we were trained in mantra-based meditation. My father meditated, so I had the role modeling at home as well. And it's something which has stayed with me. It allowed me to center myself, and I have to do it every day. Alongside exercising, I've really had to focus on what I eat. I've learned a lot about nutrition, and I've also learned about boundaries, when to say no. And I think one of the greatest skills of a leader is the ability to say no now. But meditation and stillness can come in various forms. I can get myself mentally still while swimming. When I ran, my knees don't quite allow it for it anymore. But when I ran, I found myself having real mental freedom and really enjoying the steps and the running in that. So I think it's something that every child should learn, because we live, as the book says, in the anxious generation. We know the influences digital and social media. And it is probably, you talk about dyslexia being a superpower. I say the ability to come still and live in the present moment is probably the real superpower.
Mm. So fascinating, especially in the context of so many things which take our attention, and the focus on screen time and attention deficit. And it's interesting in the Duke's global curriculum that we've given that real thought in terms of what experiences we want our children to have in terms of self-leadership and self-regulation. Fascinating. So organizations mirror their leaders very much. And Duke's education has grown very rapidly over the last 10 years. Astonishing. How do you see success? How do you know that Duke's education is successful? What does that look like?
I think most leaders will live a life which is glass half empty in their approach to their own organization. Mm-hmm. So very rarely do I look back and go, wow, what have we achieved? I look at the top of the mountain and think about the journey that we have. And in a way, I see us today still in phase one, which is putting anchor points across the global footprint that we want to. Phase two is about really shaping the curriculum. It's about influencing and designing something which is absolutely fit for purpose for the young people. And the Duke's Young Leaders curriculum, the leadership programs, the work we're doing as staff is all part of that. And really embedding that, I feel really excited if we can do that. I know we're on a journey. I know we're doing it in the right way. I don't really look back and go, have we been successful? But I know what success will be in the end.
Visionary. Got the vision. Now, we've asked a lot of questions. And given where we are in the library of the school, why not ask some of the students from Radnor House to put a couple of questions to you, if that's okay?
Yeah, happy to. Love that.
Super. So first up, we've got Zach from Year 8.
What impact did your school experience have on your life?
Hi, Zach. Great question. The latter part of my schooling, I have to say, I loved. And I loved coming to school. I loved my fellow pupils. I loved my teachers. And the whole experience, I look back as the fondest time of my educational career, more so than university, more so than my early years. And just enjoying something is something so powerful. And it's really taught me there are sort of two types of people. There's people that walk into a room and who just take the temperature, a thermometer. And there are other people who walk into a room, are the thermostat. They change the energy in it. And if you can live your life as an optimist, then the world is just going to be a better place. And schooling really taught me that. A happy schooling meant I'm fundamentally an optimist.
Hi, my name's Anushka. I'm from Year 12. And my question is, do you have any advice for university and then going on to work?
Absolutely. I think embrace all forms of learning. University is the first point where you control the pace. It is the lesson in life where you can do little, you can do a middle amount, or you can do a lot. And the freedom is exhilarating, but just use it wisely and control how much you take. And really, it's just a wonderful, fun time, but an ability to learn so many things beyond just the course itself. And I take the same into the workplace. Whatever one specializes in, whether it's the medical field or in science or in the business field. What we've worked out now, to be a leader in any of these fields, you need to have such a broad spectrum of knowledge. In my role, as well as knowing about education, I need to know a little about HR, finance, marketing, compliance, health and safety, and just having an understanding of people. So really, when you get into the workplace, just learn.
We've now got a question from Georgia, also in year 12.
My first question is, how do you make sure that all students feel included and supported?
Really good question, because we really fundamentally believe, not only in the foundation of the organization, in this concept of unity. And that unity doesn't mean in the educational approach they grow up with this idea of society and contribution and service, but it's also in how we look after our staff, how we govern, and how we look after our children. And we've talked about neurodiversity, but also equally, children just want to do different things. They might be neurotypical and just want to do different things, and their views are just equally important. We have student councils. The governors get into the classroom. I myself love teaching, is single-handedly the best thing I do. And we really are interested. And, the formation of new educational advisory board for our young people has been a perfect development, which demonstrates we really want the views of young people. And when I heard their opinions on what we should be doing as an organization, they're uber smart. And more time with children means the organization will grow faster, no doubt.
Brilliant questions. Thank you to our students for those. Now, before we go, there's one question we ask all of our guests, which is, who has had the biggest impact on your life that has led you to achieve such incredible things over the years? If there's one person, Atif, who is it that you look at and go, it's that person?
Really tough question, because my head of the school I was here, inspirational in how he brought me up and looked after me and really took me in, and really shouldn't have taken me in because I probably shouldn't have passed the admissions test, to my officer commanding, who literally treated me like his younger brother and spent a disproportionate time with me. My father is probably the single person who's had that impact over and above everyone else. To gone through what we have gone through as a family, it's just truly emotional. And to be totally steadfast, faith-based, and an eternal optimist. He is generally my best friend, and it's just been a privilege watching him and being inspired by him, and I still am every week. And I'm just fortunate enough that he can inspire my children as well. But yeah, truly extraordinary person.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Life is a continual journey of learning, as you said earlier. What's going to be the next chapter of your life story?
Hopefully it's writing the chapter for our team. I feel really passionate. One of the first things we did when we set up the organization was to develop a learning development initiative. And that has now grown under the leadership of other people to be super professional. And if we can really embed that and have our in-house university as the USP of the organization, that would be really proud. And what I'm interested in learning is how we make that absolutely embedded. And so I'm off to Harvard in September to start a course myself, to carry on my learning journey, to actually learn how we can learn. I've signed up to a number of different other smaller short courses myself. And challenge myself to continue my journey. So if you're asking others to do the same, lead from the front.
Thank you. Definitely the only boss in my entire life who on my first day of work at Duke's Education, Atif came to me and said, Libby, question, what makes your heart sing? And I knew then that I'd found where I wanted to be for a long time.
Atif, thank you so much for an inspiring conversation and joining us on How to Live an Extraordinary Life. We're incredibly grateful.
Thank you very much, Atif.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of How to Live an Extraordinary Life from Duke's Education.
On the next episode...
I don't believe that positive thinking is the solution to everything. What I do believe is that building a positive relationship with your mind is where the power lies.
If this episode has left you feeling empowered or wanting to know more, please do leave us a review and let us know what you thought. It helps others find the podcast and learn from the extraordinary lives we showcase.
And if you have an idea for a future topic, we would love to hear from you. You can WhatsApp us on 0203 951 3551. Please do also share and follow the show so you never miss an episode. And if you want to hear more about what we do at Duke's Education, you can go to dukeseducation.com.
How to Live an Extraordinary Life is a platform media production. The producer is Adrian Bradley and the executive producers are Jonathan Pascoe and Nick Minter.
Keep living your own extraordinary life, and we'll see you next time.